Uh, Good day, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I think so that we can do that for our online audience. We should include boys and girls as well, because now privacy is a big concern for everyone. It's not only business professionals, but also individuals, housewives, students of every age. They are on the online media and they will be very interested in such kind of a session. So today's session is part of our series of a Ziroh Labs series of session on data privacy. And what we do that, we discuss with industry experts a sets of challenges what we are facing in the privacy space, as well as some solutions around it, that how do we solve these kind of issues. A little bit on Ziroh Labs. At Ziroh Labs, we are doing a fundamental research and innovations, especially in the data privacy space, invented a new end-to-end encrypted framework and algorithms by which that enables privacy preserving paradigm. So we built a number of products around it as well. I'm Ajay Goel. I am one of the board members at Ziroh Labs. So let me set quickly a little context about today's call or today's session or webinar we are having. I would like to introduce in that our panelists as well, and take the discussion forward from there. So let me start that in today's world, we all aware that internet has changed the world. And it has changed the way we work, we play, we do business, we interact with each other. We do a banking, if we travel on a GPS assisted cars, and maybe we can order even a food. So it brought a huge level of convenience to the people. And with the click of a button in the comfort of your home, you can order all those kind of services. Secondly, also many of us believe that majority of these services are free. Not only convenience, but like I send an email, which is completely free. I send messaging is free. And then maybe I watch a movie or listen to a song, that's also free. I store a data in the cloud, that's also free. So many of us feel that it's not only convenience, but it adds something very free things to me, and there's a wider adoption to it. But once you, personally to me, it really bothers me because nothing is free in the world. Who is actually paying for all that? And there where the challenges really lies. And especially, it may not be a straightforward scenarios. Like I experienced myself that once I was communicating to a friend of mine that I'm coming to Bombay tomorrow. And within 2 minutes, I started getting an ads from an airline company and a hotel company indicating that I may like to book a ticket. That triggered me that, yeah, something is not wrong. Somebody is reading my email or messages and then passing on those information to somebody else. And those guys are sending me those data. So that was a scary kind of scene. But it can also help during the COVID kind of scenarios, the COVID apps. They were enabling us to track that where we are going, are we meeting or are we in touch with any COVID sets of people. But they were having all the information about where we go, what we do and things of those kinds. So it's definitely a scary world. And my privacy is not fully secured. So one of the topic today we're going to discuss today with the panelists is that what are the challenges we are facing and what are the possible solutions in this space. So let me set one more context before we take it this forward. Context of what kind of a data on an online scenario available. or where the data is produced, or what kind of a data is shared in the online when we interact online. The first kind of a data is the data we willingly share. That means we want to share the open public. We put it on a Twitter, or we give a review for a public consumptions. So we're willingly giving those data into the net. The second kind of a data which goes into the net is that I want sharing or interacting with a confidential data either on my business or my private use. But I want that only the recipient should see that data, not anybody else. But the data goes on the online. So that's the second type of data which goes online. The third is anything what we do on the net. It generates data. Either we travel somewhere, the GPS generates data. If we do a browse something, what we have seen, which website we have gone, what kind of things what we have seen, whom we have interacted with. It also generates data. And we don't know who collects that data and what people do of that data, because that data is also there. And that data is extremely valuable to multiple companies because they can monetize that data big time without my permission. So that means now if I go on a net and I generate these kinds of data, and somebody can be finding that data can be very useful for their businesses and they can monetize it. And that's a scary scenario. So these are some of the topics we will discuss today. So let me introduce our distinguished panel today. We have Professor Sarda. He was our professor at IIT Bombay, Computer Science and Engineering Department. He used to also head the Computer Science Department, and he is now Ziroh Labs Board of Advisor as well. And we have Partha Chakravarty, a very distinguished practitioner on privacy. You know, when I talked to him some time back, I really liked what he said. And I noted down that he's working at the intersection of privacy, anthropology, technology, and economics. He worked for many large organizations, and he's one of the top experts in the privacy space. Thank you, Partha, for joining us today. Priya Bhardwaj, thank you, Priya, for coming here. Again, a security professional, a privacy practitioner. Okay, and she brings a different perspective to you on a data privacy management services aspects of it, and even the GRC space. So we have a very diverse and solid panel. Professor Sir will talk about, maybe give us more technology, and practitioners will give you what exactly running on the ground. So let us start, sir, our actual session on this. To start with, I felt that let us first address the issue on data privacy and data security. There's a small confusion around it. Are they similar? Are they different? Are they connected? From a different perspective, let's address this thing, what is data privacy is and what is data security is. And maybe, Professor Sir, if you can start with, from a technology point of view or your point of view on that, and then we'll move on the roundtable.
So, thank you first for inviting me and making me part of this roundtable. As you know, I have worked with many companies. I have also done a lot of research in computer science, and I understand the challenges of data systems which collect data, which process data, which share data. And as you brought out in the context setting, I think that summarized it very well, that as connected citizens, willingly or unwillingly, without understanding the implications, we share data. And sometimes in order to use those services, we need to share the data. So if I have to hire Uber for coming here today, for example, I need to know where I'm going, yes, right? And where did I start from? What is my phone number, my name? All of these things are essential. It's part of the new digitized world where these applications are driving. Right? And as you said, when we find that a lot of applications are free, So somebody said it very well that when something is free, then you are paying it for it. If somebody is selling your data. So I have seen that at banks that I consult with, that some of the very important technology initiatives. For example, Reserve Bank of India has an initiative on creating a public loans, public credit registry. So a lot of data is being aggregated, and they are going to be very useful for the economy, for today's world. That this will probably do excellent credit rating or handling of bankruptcies and things like that. So it is important that we collect this data. The data may be personal or data may be organizational, and we need to understand what data is being collected, how it will be used, how it will be processed, and what is the life cycle of that data. Because the data becomes history over time, but history also is becoming important to understand, let's say, how things are evolving. So we need to understand, as let's say, those who are contributing to that data either at personal level or at organizational level. And I have seen this becoming important on a day-to-day basis, especially with the regulators, government, trying to ensure that privacy is handled. Now here the privacy is broadly defined as the intended use of data. Okay. So what data is shared? So let's say if I am sharing my data with the bank, all my transactions are happening in my account. Bank cannot say that I don't want to know your transactions. You need to, in order to just simply maintain my balance and do my credit profiling, they need to know that I am spending money this way, that way. But I trust them, and therefore I am willing to share the data, and it's a part of service that I am taking from them. But when the data is stored in the system, the data is not only used for the intended purpose by executing those applications and programs, but data is lying in the system. And that's why regulators have defined these norms that data must be protected when it is stationary, when data is moving, and at every possible place. Because once the data is digitized, it is accessible whether willingly or unwillingly. And that is where security comes in. So I would think of privacy as some kind of a policy. Okay, this is what my data is and its intended use. But security is a mechanism by which I enforce it. I can give access rights, I can give access controls, and only to those who are the right people with whom I should share the data. Now, of course, with digitization, things evolve. Once the data is shared, data is available. Now, data may move from there willingly, unwillingly, and we know that the kind of challenges open systems face today, that the systems are available on the net, they are available to unintended users, hackers, and people who create all kinds of programs which can steal the data. Yes. And therefore, it's important that security and privacy both are clearly understood. And whenever you create infrastructure for organizations which will handle the data, which will process the data, both the security, what they call security vector, or the kind of privacy policies that you would want to enter into with your stakeholders, all these need to be very clearly defined. It's becoming more and more of an issue, and I think all organizations are aware of solving this problem in the best possible way. And individuals, of course, as you brought out, we are terribly concerned. I'm seeing advertisements, and I don't know what kind of data I'm sharing, both as a consequence of living in the physical world, because now physical and digital world are so entangled, you don't know where one stops and where the other starts over. So we need to be very, very clear about these issues.
So let me go over to Partha right now. Thank you, Professor. So Partha, you talk about a privacy paradox. Give a view, like Professor gave a view from a technology perspective. Give us a view, maybe from a legal perspective, technology perspective, or your models that how the privacy and security really
Yeah, and first of all, thanks, Ajay, for having me here. It's really a pleasure. Let me step back a little bit and try and attempt to demystify the binary debate that we always see, privacy versus security. But I think it's quite like a Venn diagram. You see, there is privacy and then there is security, right? And in the legal terms, privacy is a very distinct human right in the EU because of their past history, because of the violations that have happened on individuals, World War II, the regimes and all of that. So history is replete with that. It's my intrinsic human right. So what is privacy? And just kind of, again, not quoting it from anything, but again, a very classic textbook kind of a definition would be that in privacy, it would be my ability or my control to share information about me in a particular context in the manner in which I want. So if I have a group of trusted friends over here and we trust each other, I'm okay to discuss a few things. I'm okay to discuss my inner secrets, my vulnerabilities with my best friend. But I'm not okay to do it with my employer. So that is the control, the ability to control what kind of information about myself I would release or share in a particular context and how much. Security, to my mind, and that's where the confusion happens, because for some reason when people talk about, oh, it's a data protection law, then why can't we call it data privacy law? Data protection, on the other hand, is another distinct right, or an obligation rather, which companies have to fulfill. If I give my Aadhaar number, or if you give your SSN number or driving license, it is the obligation on the company to protect it. That's their accountability. And that's why essentially the paradox of privacy and security would have to be seen, because security is not in my control. I can have my behavior, but once I give it to you, you need to protect it. You need to encrypt it. You need to ensure that no one steals it. And then privacy is something I need to be given my own set of controls to be able to manage it. So I think, well, again, classical. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, we keep on talking about it. That's security part. They will also talk about privacy, that, okay, it's confidential data, but there are a lot of things which privacy alone does. For instance, how much data to share? Is it legal to collect that piece of data? Can data move from one country to another? How long should I store it? Blah, 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 correct? And to me, I think I'll probably end up saying that security is a necessary condition for privacy, but not a sufficient condition. You can have a system with perfect security, but it could be absolutely be breaching privacy, in my view, if the data or the personal data is more of a European term and it is PII in the US, if that set of data is excessive. So to my mind, and I think that's extremely important, and thanks for that question, I think, as Professor was also saying, that apart from just a means, right, we need to be very distinct that there are two different things. And to my mind, this debate between privacy and security, obviously it will continue, but more often than not, it's not a privacy versus security debate. It's often a security versus security debate. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Wonderful. Very thought-provoking. Priya, good. You are helping many corporate companies around the world in their data privacy aspects of it. What's your experience and thought processes around how privacy and securities are perceived and looked into your business scenarios? Maybe some thoughts around.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this chance and to share the experience with you all. So, as Professor Sir and Partha told about the privacy aspects in the legality and the what continuation is in the organization. So, there is like always a confusion about the privacy and security in the organization. In fact, we individual also think about what is exactly the privacy and security which is coming. So I mean, in my point of view, privacy and security runs simultaneously, because if we not run simultaneously, we cannot make it different, and also we cannot fill the gaps between privacy and security methodologies. So privacy in terms like, yes, a lot of regulations are coming, as you know, GDPR came in picture, where they have enforced, like, EU citizens, individuals' data have to be comply with the regulations, mandatory controls, and their individual personality and predefined data. So that comes in the privacy. Yes, we have enforced some legal regulations. Like privacy defined with the data life cycle, how the data is collected, how the data is shared, used, transferred. And so this is the life cycle which regulation also defined, where they have to they have to convince the privacy experts and the organization, like, this is the life cycle you have to follow in and out. But yes, rightly said by Partha, like, yes, organization have to control the security and protect the data. So from there the security comes, like, organization have to protect the individuals and customer data. That build the trust also. There the policy, process and technology comes in picture and frame, like, yes, we have some regulations enforced, we have built the privacy aspects, like, yes, there are certain articles, there are certain regulatory bodies which they are coming up with the thoughts, like, whenever you are processing or transferring data, you have to secure your data. So there the security comes, and technology drives, like, lot of technologies. There is a driven data about the encryption part and other policy and process. That pillars came with the people, process and technology. So in that way, organization have adapted the privacy and security with the combination. They are running with the pillar of people, process and technology. So that covers the individuality and also the organizational customers' data. So that builds the trust that, yes, in the organization, we are following the privacy norms, where the regulatory body have enforced, where you are revolving around it. And yes, organization have adapted about the security posture. Yes, without the security thing, the privacy cannot run, and security without the security thing, it's a vice versa thing. It's a combination. Simultaneously, we run the privacy and security thing. So to end up and to summarize the thing, yes, there is a little bit different on the privacy and security methodology and terminologies. But yes, it runs with the combination of the life cycle of pyramids, life cycle of parameters we have set in the privacy, like, have to follow how the data is collected, used, transferred or shared, and where it is going exactly. In that way, the authorization also comes, like, yes, who is accountable and who is not accountable. So that's, yes.
Good. Let's take it forward from here. Then maybe I'll share some of the experience of mine. One day I was addressing a school students some time back, and this question came up. They said that I spend a lot of my time in security and privacy part of it. Explain this difference. So I put together some thoughts together that how do we explain in a very simplistic way. So I gave an analogy of a home. We put on our windows curtains. So curtain gives you a privacy to a home. That means outside people cannot peep in and see what's happening around inside my house, and share, and may not be able to share with other people that what is happening in my house. So my house has a privacy, and nobody can look into my house and share what's happening to others, what's going on. And similarly, in the connected world, if I send some data, nobody should be able to see my data and tell to anybody that Ajay has sent this data to somebody else like this, and this data had this kind of a things. And the security, I said that I put in a lock and key, some in a vault or in a safe. And that is called the security part of it. That means people can now come into that and take the whole safe of mine and take it away. So I have to secure by key and lock, while in a privacy, nobody should be able to see and look into it. And in the security, people take the data away. So so that was the context what I gave it to kids, those part of it, explaining to that. And they're connected also. They're different and they're connected together. And both has to be there. People should not be able to infringe into your privacy part of it and should not be able to see, as well as should not be able to take your data away also. And both are big concerns. Okay, so we have set the ground rule for this, and let's check the second part out on the privacy problems. What are the serious problems happening on the data privacy side, both from the personal angle as well as on the business angle on it? Maybe Professor Sir, would you like to, I remember you shared something about various kind of vulnerability exists. What kind of challenges this data privacy poses to the rest of the world?
So, as we have all discussing, trying to understand these two paradigms of privacy and security. So again, I thought, one way of summing up is that, when I have my data being shared, I need to have a policy of what I want to share, with whom I want to share, right, and what purpose I want to share. Now, once I have shared, can I really have a control on it anymore? So, in fact, in some of the systems, like in database systems, for example, which actually is a repository of data, and there are many applications and many users of that database. They are all authorized users of database, trusted users of database, but they actually provided a very fine access control. So, certain fields in the database, I can say that this user doesn't need to see. So let's say when I am the dean, I can see every student's CPI, grades, etc. But a teacher who is teaching the database course need not see the grades of the operating system course also. So that is where the security requires understanding what is required by the user. And database systems did a good job that when I grant a permission, I can grant the permission on the entire database or on selected data. Not only that, I can actually grant him rights to further share that data with a grant permission. So whether he can only consume the data or can he share it further. Because that is where we need really some good techniques, that once I have a trusted party, what does it do with my data? And since it is in digital form, it can easily be shared further. Database systems actually recognize this issue. They actually give you a grant permission that they can even revoke that permission. That now you cannot share it any further. But in the real systems, outside the database, organizations which store the data, of course they can say that there are trusted programs, there are trusted users. But what happens is that there are a lot of untrusted issues that come in, right from the platform level. So we see that operating systems have some vulnerabilities. Right? Even hardware has vulnerabilities. Yeah. So without intention, there may be somebody who is penetrating into the environment and capturing the data by posing as the administrator of that system. In fact, systems need to be administered, and the most powerful people in organizations are database administrators and application administrators. So a database administrator of a credit registry actually can tell you which businessman is taking loans for what kind of project that he is planning. He can just enter into the database with his privileges and actually break the intended use of the data because he is really not authorized. So basically access control gets violated because of these loopholes in the environment, and we have been calling them by different names like virus, and then phishing attacks, and all kinds of things where people actually somehow break into the spaces. And there are solutions are being deployed now. You actually create firewalls, you can create honeybee or honeypot solutions, and you keep monitoring all the network activities. Is somebody unauthorized coming into this? And all that is basically for the security purpose. And security is intended as a shield for the privacy. So I don't want that to be going up. So when these people enter into the system, they can extract the data, they can share, and because the data, if it is stored in a clear form, right, my salary appears as a salary numeric quantity, it is not encrypted, then it is vulnerable. So encryption becomes a mechanism by which I can try protecting against such unauthorized, unintended attacks on the system. So there are a number of things which are actually happening, and this happens even more as we go into the cloud. See, earlier at least there was a physical protection to the system. My PC was my PC, but now it is connected on the network. When I download something, I don't know whether it has virus.
Yes.
Once it has virus, I don't know when it will activate itself, when it will be remotely controlled. When I enter a password into my bank, will it be tracking those key movements? I mean, the kind of vulnerabilities without our explicit knowledge and intention is, increasing day by day. And we really need to ensure now what really are those mechanisms which, in spite of all this, can protect my data. And we generally have been believing that encryption is the.
All right, very good, Professor Sir. Maybe Partha, I come to you. A little bit, you talked with me sometime back on the online surveillance, and in a fine balance is required between convenience and the privacy aspects of it. So what are the challenges you are seeing on the privacy side, keeping that into mind?
Yeah. So I think we never had these smartphones probably 15 years back, right? And as all of us we said, probably to do a transaction, book a ticket, order a food, our digital technologies are helping us to make our life simpler, right? So that's convenience. We all want that, right? But then we are probably not realizing, not as probably as consumers, less of consumers, but more as creators of those products, as to what exactly are we foregoing in trying to only think about convenience all the time, right? And here let me give you an example of, I don't want to name the retailer, US retailer, it's there in the public domain, where the US retailer did a complete profiling of a teenager who was actually going to the shop and buying certain products which a lady would buy if one is pregnant. And then the retailer kind of profiled what is she buying, what is it, a unscented perfume and all of that, and created such a profile that the retailer then sent that email to the individual, and it landed up in her father's mailbox for whatever reason. The father was aghast. He said, "How come? This is like, are you telling me that my daughter is pregnant?" The father went back, investigated, and realized after a few days that indeed it's true. The father went back to the store manager in the US and said, "I'm sorry. What you said is true. There are certain things that have happened in my absence, and my daughter is indeed pregnant." That created a huge furor in the industry. See, here is a company who's probably trying to help, right? But then the question is one trying to also keep into consideration the sensibility? Privacy is very cultural. And therefore, as much as there is convenience, we might end up losing that convenience, and we might invite more trouble and more of a reputation or identity theft. We don't realize that when there is a lot of data, as you were also rightly saying, and when a product is free, we pay for it with our own data, right? And therefore, this overall concept of surveillance, and beautiful book by Shoshana, by a US author, forgetting her name, it's called Surveillance Capitalism. And what it primarily talks about is how we are leaving our digital footprints all across that we go. and it is either used by law enforcement agencies who would probably do it in the hope of that they protect us, but depends to what extent, or it is being used by multiple other companies for them to sell our product by looking at our inferred data. And I think this will grow. There is never a very swift there cannot be a quick solution to it. It has to be tackled at a design level. Be it a product or a process or anything, it has to be seen that it has to really start from a data minimization perspective, and that's a very profound principle in privacy across the globe, that one has to really figure out, do I really need this piece of information? It might look tempting, but do I really need to give my identity card detail even if I have to go and just do the reservation online? Not needed, right? I can show my card, they can see it, and there is no need for me to probably do it at the time of booking. Every time when you go to, and today if you really see, Aadhaar has become kind of a de facto ID for everything when it is actually against the law. It is only required for a PAN seeding or probably giving public subsidies, right? It is not required for a majority of reasons. As parents, right, I have been able, I see that, even for my son's schooling, I'm being required to sometimes ask that, okay, do you have your Aadhaar, right? And Aadhaar seems to be, I said, okay, why don't you get some other? Why do you really need that? No, sir, it's a policy. So, you see, we are invariably, for some reason or the other, we are creating a situation where the end user really doesn't know, and he will end up giving all of that piece of information. So I think in this entire digital world, as much as there is convenience, there is also this attendant consequence which we are not realizing, and this I attribute to three reasons. A, primarily because we are not looking at a policy making where the lawmakers, the lawyers, and the engineers, they really are putting their head together, in my view. They are, at least a bill, right? And we see that it's gone. Second reason is also because I think sometimes certain things happen because of a lazy policy design and architecture. We just want to give it a jiffy, and we don't think about it because the release has to happen as of yesterday. And the third one is, as human beings, we are paradoxical. We want quick, 2-minute Maggi noodles. And therefore, we don't realize that if I don't give it, is there an alternative? Because he will say, sir, you will miss this. So you just give your mobile number, there's a 100 rupee debate in a mall. And we don't realize, 100 rupees, okay, fair enough. And we don't realize that what we are actually surrendering in the long run will somehow or the other impact us. The question is, it's a very lonely battle. And therefore, we need to be very, very sure about, and this can range, because this is not just about this battle of this, it is also a question of, as you rightly said, convenience, right? Now, you must be reading in the newspapers, Bangalore will soon have facial recognition technology at airports. How many people would really care about it, right? You'll say, okay, it's convenient, wow, it's fast. But think for a moment where you and me are stopped at the airport and they say that while you're on the watch list, it could be a type 1, type 2 error. So you are gone. And you suffer more because at that point of time, you suffer more of a reputational damage because others are watching you. They say, something is wrong with this individual. And this notion or this idea that privacy is, I've got nothing to hide, is a very tenuous argument. I can keep on going talking about it. And to conflict privacy with secrecy, there is another thing which I keep on hearing. There are two different things. Privacy is how much of information I am willing to share at my own will with people. And people have probably no right to know that, only that. Well, secrecy is, to some extent, it is others' right to know that information. If a politician is there in the public sphere, it is others' right to know how he's kind of spending the public money and if he's using the public money for his own personal gains. Because they have the right to know because they have spent that money. But the public doesn't still have the right to know what that politician does in his home or in his own confine, because even public figures have a right to privacy.
Well,
perfect. One point which comes out from Partha's discussion is there ethical issues involved in this? Because see, now this is a very well-known case about artificial intelligence and analytics. So now the retailer is doing business, when he naturally wants to expand and increase his business. So he has a conflicting goal compared to the individual. And when he is pointing out that somebody is looking at these products because of any possible pregnancy reasons, is he doing a service or is he crossing the limits of limits? These are really very challenging issues, and as you said, his decision may not be consistent with my decision. He wants to store this data, every footprint, everything that you look at, he wants to store from business promotion point of view. So these are things which are always going to be conflicting with
Correct.
the users and the owners of the data.
Professor, you absolutely rightly said, when I was getting involved into this privacy matters many years back, I also came across very similar thing. Instead of clicking I agree on that EULA, I said, let me see that EULA, what's written in that EULA. I went into details of
Scary.
very, very scary. Actually, I agreed. By clicking that button, I agree. I have agreed to all these email service providers, all these storage providers, something which I cannot, in a normal life, I cannot agree. That means my data belongs to them. They can have a right for doing everything.
Regulators who understand these issues don't help me.
Yes.
They don't even phrase it in the manner in which I understand what I'm giving away.
And it's legally, they are corrected. That means you cannot do anything to them. It's a major challenge.
In a 5-star hotel I went recently, he asked for my government certified identity card.
Yes.
Now, it could be either driving license, which I don't have. So the only thing I keep, he doesn't accept PAN.
Yes.
So it has to be Aadhaar only.
Aadhaar only.
So I think just to take that point, when you said that, this the EULA and the terms and condition, there have been studies, and I was reading some time back, that, across multiple, in the digital domain, right, people just don't care about these privacy policies because it has never been written in a manner, leaving aside a few, where a common man can understand in a readable English. It's all full of legal jargons. And the challenge is that for the end, even if you're installing a software, right, you just press next, and go on, right? And the challenge is, from a readability perspective, from the usability perspective, it's a just-in-time notice. It's hidden somewhere. You're making it conditional on something, so your consent is invalid. And that is why I think this notion, as you said, I agree. The modern privacy framework are moving away from consent. They're moving away from consent to an accountability-based framework.
Yes.
Don't put the obligation, okay, if you take my consent, right? Any company or any service provider would take my consent. An ISP would take my consent. Even after I've given my consent, I don't control how the telecom company would use it. So therefore, because they're much more smarter than me, technologically, process-wise. So to me, in today's world, consent is hardly freely given. See, consent, also has to be that when you give your consent, you have the right and the law to even revoke it. It's not that it is a perpetual consent.
So
and that is why
GDPR
to some extent is helping, but it's not. If you ask me, it's not a perfect law. It was intended to be, but I think it's still 4 years, right, Professor? So of course, GDPR to some extent helps, but of course, it doesn't to many extent. It's a huge debate as to where, and there's then this debate about data localization, and more so on the consent, right? I think no law is good or bad. It all depends how consent has to be used in a specific point, special category of data, where it is completely voluntary. There it makes sense to take a consent. And if we have to take a consent, we need to then understand what these legal things means in the engineering perspective.
Yeah.
Because I've always seen that, and for me, when I do the job as a privacy practitioner, I'm not a lawyer, but I can decipher this legal. Seldom does a lawyer and an engineer, you will always find that they are being involved and they are talking cohesively during a business requirement document preparation. A lawyer would sit somewhere in the remote corner and then try to do, and obviously he or she is doing the job. Here is this engineer doing something, the project manager is doing something, and the UI UX person is doing something. They're all fragmented. It has to come in an agile manner in a cohesive unit. Only then an engineer would be able to understand, provided the lawyer makes it easy to understand what does consent means: freely given, specific, unambiguous, and informed. Otherwise, I see this will continue to be there despite all the lovely technologies that we talk about, because fundamentally it's a design issue.
Sure. Partha, I agree with you. Let's just see, because you have set the ground for the next question. Maybe on the same topic, Priya, since you have been involved into some GDPR implementation, how do you see the challenges your customers have been facing related to privacy, and will this GDPR or these regulations around the world are helping these customers with the problem they have been facing?
Yeah, exactly. This is altogether a challenge for the customers, because I always see with the three aspects of AAA, like acceptance, accountability, and authorization. And acceptance is like accepting the new thing, because as we are working in the organization, where a lot of stuff we have to do in a day-to-day. And if something new will come, so they are revolving around why this new thing is coming, why it is not leveraged in the existing thing. But as GDPR came in picture for the privacy of individuals, is exactly for the EU citizens, but now the world is accepting that. Worldwide, every country is accepting, and they are actually adapting the privacy bills. They are coming up with the new privacy laws in their respective regions, with a lot of norms, and also that
is the end consumer is finding it that his privacy is protected under those regulations?
No, actually, the privacy is a myth. Is said, it is rightly said, but privacy is protected with the within the organization only if it is adapted appropriately. If it is not adapted appropriately, as yes, layman person, like if I am not a legal person, so I cannot read and I cannot understand and I cannot identify the exact requirement from that particular regulation. But it can be converted in terms of privacy policy, consents, as they having a legal grounds, how to protect the data, while whatever the purpose to be defined. So this should be defined in that manner, so that if I am going to any website and reading their privacy policy, if I have the curiosity to understand what they are doing with my data, so that awareness can be culturized, like yes, this privacy policy has been built for them. They can understand what the purpose is defined, how they are using my data, where it is going, how it is secured. But I saw yes, I mean, they need the things very quick and enforcement is coming, so we have to just develop and implement. No, there should be some appropriately driven cycle for all of the aspects to adapt the
so
culture.
That's a challenge, yeah.
Yes.
I agree with you. So that leads me.
What I like about GDPR is it's like something like our RTI.
Yeah.
I can actually ask them
That's right.
what data you are storing and how they are using.
Exactly.
In fact, I think some countries are going a step ahead. They are saying that you have a right to records. You can ask your data to be removed from their system.
Yes.
In fact, the new thing is coming like do not sell. So California has built as do not sell the data. So until unless you don't have the consent from the individuals or the organization, so they have to put the opt-in and opt-out. Yes, there is a mandate thing is coming like do not sell. They cannot sell the data of
But
the
it's
individual.
all still a legal framework, am I right?
Yes.
But it's auditable.
Auditable, yes.
It's auditable.
Because the penalties are always enforced.
The penalties are there, but like in multiple copies of the same data lies all over the place. How do you do that?
I think our regulator conducts audits on all the banks.
Yes.
And they actually look at their entire security infrastructure, security
Yes.
policy,
Exactly.
security implementations, and all logs are looked at. I think that is there. Now, audit is one way of regulating.
So let me go to the last question of our debate today. So we discussed about a little bit on the privacy and security, defined the context. Then we looked at the challenges. Let's what the solution really lies. So the third aspect of that is the solution aspect of it. Both technologically solution, can we protect privacy of individual who is the owner of data? Either can be individual or can be businesses. It has to be definitely a combination of technology as well as a legal framework together.
Yes.
Maybe Professor Sir, again, I'll come and start with you. That what are the various technological framework possible to protect? Because I understand that it may not be alone technology can solve this. It has to be a combination of both. Then maybe what are the technologies currently available and what are coming, what you can foresee coming ahead?
So it's of course a continuously evolving kind of a scenario. But once we understand that privacy is violated when security is breached, somehow you manage to break the security, you acquire access control, you acquire somebody else's password and this and that, you can access the data. And when you create digital infrastructure, you try to make it as secure as possible and also keep monitoring that infrastructure. And therefore, lots of tools and technologies have been introduced to actually see that you have the right kind of oversight on the infrastructure that you have created. So, for example, there are VLPT, that is vulnerability analysis, penetration testing is there. Then there are security operations center who are constantly monitoring the attack profiles and trying to check whether those attacks are happening on your infrastructure, whether they are happening. And there are all kinds of policies. But ultimately, if ever an exposure happens, the only thing that will protect you is the encryption. Something which can let you have the data, but is encrypted, you really can't do anything about it. So I think encryption can be a very strong tool to provide, in a way, I mean, you can think of it as a technology for privacy. Because only when I give an authorization, share the key, the data can be seen by someone. So in this case, therefore, the regulator's mandate in India has been, so far covering only two aspects, storage and emotion. But what has not happened yet is the vulnerabilities where the data is under processing. Because once the data is brought into memory, there are memory resident viruses.
Yes.
And they can peek into your data. And what is coming, they can actually be completely, what you may call in a silent mode, waiting for the right kind of data to come. In fact, today the virus control and attacks are being monitored from elsewhere. And somebody is actually looking at all the activities in your system, and there is you can say, a person, knowledgeable person, coordinating all this. So best would be to take the third logical step, which is that the data its processing also remains in encrypted form. And I know that because of that it gets protected. And only those who have the keys would use the data. Of course, see, there are people who want to use that data legally and for business reasons, and they want to process it. So if I'm doing aggregation on data, I'm building models, as you said, if I can do that on encrypted data itself, I'm actually closing the last loophole in the whole chain, that I am not going to let the data be seen by anyone unless the key sharing happens. Now, of course, that remains one more vulnerability. Key being hacked. There are people talking about, the keys and quantum algorithms which will probably hack the keys in minutes or seconds. Now, that is the way in which, of course, more security frameworks will have to be built. But people are today quite, analyzing this whole chain, that can the data remain in that secure form? And that is where the contributions of Ziroh Labs that you mentioned in the beginning actually sort of looks like closing the whole cycle, where the data remains, in
end-to-end encrypted.
And I now have the control on the data. In fact, technologies like Web3 and other 3.0, would ensure that, today's paradigm of giving away the data and let these technology companies store the data with them, or the application organization store the data, I can actually change the paradigm and keep the data with me as owner
Control.
and give control and access as required. So that, I think, is definitely a paradigm that we should look forward to, provided there are right kind of frameworks which will also allow my partners to be providing me services. See, I don't want to enclose myself in a vault where nobody can see me and I'm fully protected but of no use to anyone else. So I think it has to be meaningful share.
No, very, very, very well said, Professor. Maybe Partha, little bit about your views on what are the frameworks you see, maybe technologically or legal frameworks are getting evolved, like there are regulations coming in, how it can be merged together with the technology framework so that the holistic things can happen. Like Professor talked about in end-to-end encryptions. That means encryption during rest, encryption during transit, and encryption during processing without sharing your keys. So the ownership of data lies with the owner of the data all the times. And then you can do all kind of aspects of these are technology frameworks which are evolving. What's your views on it? What kind of things, what you are?
Yeah. So I think thanks for the question. I think Professor has already kind of built on the technology part. I think coming to encryption per se, it's a dual-use technology, right? It's a double-edged sword.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to.
And therefore, one has to also be cognizant of the fact that as much as there is an encryption that we certainly should embrace, it's quite like electricity, right? But we have to be conscious of the fact that sometimes law enforcement agencies, and majorly, they struggle if they are not able to decrypt that information, because there is a criminal who has kind of, under the cloak of privacy, they've kind of done certain things like child sexual abuse materials, right? On the other hand, a weakening of encryption can be a stifling effect on free speech, democracy. We all know that, right? So I think what is really required is a combination of people, process, technology. And there has to be checks and balances as to who checks the checkers, right? I say that with responsibility. If you have given we all go to a hotel and sometimes we give our key to the valet to park. It works on trust. We don't go back and then see what he will do. It works on trust, right? So at the end of the day, in my view, we may have technology, right? But the human being will always remain the weakest element in the strongest chain. And we do talk about zero trust models and all of that. But we have seen histories replete where governments across the world, they do surveillance. And that is, of course, you would have heard about the Schrems II decision in Europe, where Schrems II is a major decision from the Court of Justice of the European Union, the top court in the EU, where they've said that EU data cannot go to the US because of their surveillance laws.
Yeah.
Now, whether it is right or wrong is probably the jury is still out because the view from Europe is a fundamental right. US takes more or less a very capitalistic view, a laissez-faire approach. But I would rather say that US did have the state breach notification laws, which Europe did not have prior to GDPR, leaving aside a few states like Netherlands to the best of that I know. So I think it is not just a matter of technology.
Yeah.
Human beings should stand on the shoulders of technology and not the other way around. And we should not have blind faith in technology. And we must always understand the fact that if there is an encryption, there is also a decryption key. And that can be broken. It is not that it cannot be broken.
Sure.
The question is, who has the authority to break it? In which situation? If the surveillance laws, do they have those guardrails built? Supposing if someone has to break, of course there is a law enforcement agency, do they do it under a judicial warrant? Or just anyone will break it? Mm-hmm. So there has to be a probable cause, and that's why the surveillance law reforms across the globe has to be there. That has been, and of course in India, we all know now that privacy is a fundamental right. under the Puttaswamy judgment, right? And therefore, the three tests of legality, necessity, and proportionality is equally incumbent on state bodies, for that matter, right? On the state. And that has been a big debate because, of course, the new bill, the state had given excessive powers onto themselves. So, see, the relationship in privacy is privacy with whom? With a customer to a business, individual to a state, or individual to individual. Sure. And our expectations change. But I think it has to be a matter or a combination of policy level, which should then dictate how technology has to be designed. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I think it's also about awareness of people. And I think it's grossly missing, starting right from the schools to the college level and to even to experts who would probably say, oh, privacy is all about confidentiality. I find this funny with all due regards to all such experts, but it's not. It's simply not. And therefore, and privacy also it suffers from a self-imposter syndrome, right? In the sense that they'll think that, oh, everything has to be, maybe security is right, and this is a self-imposter syndrome of privacy. And therefore, I believe that privacy certainly has to now become, it is already a board level issue. So data protection officers have to be taken seriously, and you need data protection officers who understand the subject. You need not have lawyers for this. I'm not a lawyer, but I still do this job. But of course, it has to be seen as I say, right? And that's why it is a human issue. It is an anthropological issue. It is a social issue. You never know when it will hit. And therefore, I think as much as there is encryption, which is very good, we have to also understand how can that be broken? And then have those checks and balances and then see who's authorized to override those in which situation.
Sure. This is an important point. Yeah. Many organizations today have what they call CISO.
Yes. Which is security officer. Privacy. Yes.
Yeah. So basically the other point I wanted to make was that frameworks will have to evolve and they will have the legal backing. So for example, you have this PCI-DSS.
That's right.
And
NIST.
Can we imagine that without that, cards will ever work? No. In fact, there has to be PCI DSS audit and certification. Similarly, when we talk of these surveillance systems and others, which are legally and required for social requirement, so we really need some kind of frameworks, and these frameworks are being created by the regulators. Right? Yeah. Something we will have to do. Key management is the biggest issue. I am on the board of this eMudra, which is a big company in India which actually does trust services. And they are so well regulated. Yeah. In fact, they have just started HTTPS service. To start that service and do the key management, they have to collaborate with all the browser companies. Company like these well-known browsers that we use, they take 2 to 3 years to certify that infrastructure is audited all the time. Yeah. So I think audit is one mechanism.
Exactly.
Maybe Priya, you talked some time back about artificial intelligence and all those technologies coming in now. Yeah. How those things can complement or supplement in a privacy areas, like Professor talked about encryption, you talked about legal aspects of it. Do you see how whole thing is happening around?
So as we talk, a lot of emerging technologies are coming, sure. and it is coming day to day with metaverses there, blockchain is there, so if you talk about
can people predict that this can be those kinds of, it's not metadata, you can do a lot.
Yes, it's already happening, because as we were discussing about the metadata, right? So artificial intelligence, I think it's driven by the metadata, because it's for example, let me tell you, as we are using the Instagram on daily basis, right? So whatever we search and whatever we saw in that, so that they are we thought they are reading our minds, because whatever relatable videos we are seeing, so next time that only the video is coming, we thought why this again and again this type of videos are coming to see. So that's artificial intelligence, that is whatever we are searching as of now in the browser or maybe in social network sites. So they are taking and they are tracking our things, what we are exactly doing. So tracking the things, like we track our things, like we like this, so we can do
How do
this.
we block these kind of behavior analysis?
Yes.
See, it's a general tendency that we see many things when we go on a site. And somebody is tracking those things, that I went and this at this point of time and I'm moving this and that. And then they're predicting that this can be my personality.
Exactly.
This can be my identity. And then they're trying to figure that out and then fine-tuning all the time, those kinds of things. So it's a indirect way of understanding my privacy.
Can I add to it, if you permit?
Yeah, of course.
I think technology alone cannot solve this problem, right? Just in privacy under GDPR, there is something called Data Protection Impact Assessment, right? Which is DPIA. While it is good, but sometimes it kind of gets into the weeds and, it's complicated and businesses wouldn't like it. It goes through its own rigmarole. There's also now an emerging concept in AI where it goes to an ethical impact assessment.
Yes.
And there are ethical review boards, so on and so forth. And therefore, ethics has to design an AI model which is ethically designed. So what do we mean by ethics, for instance? So for instance, if I'm wearing a kind of a watch which tracks how much steps I took, what is the kind of food, when did I wake up, how much did I sleep, what time did I wake up, and what time did I wake up?
Everything.
Did I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and again I went to sleep at 3:45 and then woke up at 6, and then kind of juxtapose that data with my social media? I could be under, a lot of people who are unknown to me can make an inference about me. That here is a person who's probably, in their own minds, right? Who's probably healthy, fit. Insurance companies can say, oh, well, he is kind of really, maybe he's suffering from something. Lower the insurance premium. We drive on the roads, GPS tracker continuously tracking us, right? We've seen it, right? And FASTag is one of the classic examples. So your location. The question is, I think there is a need to sit down and understand ethics here. And the question here would start in, because it's all about data, do we really have to do it? Because at the end of the day, it's also a responsibility and accountability of any organization to do something which is ethically right and not do something which is convenient. And I think it's a very difficult challenge. But at the same time, unless it is done from that perspective, I think we will continue to be bereft of that idea, a very pristine idea, that privacy is all about human beings. And put the user in the centric of the design and then try to do your stress control. What if I put this control, how will you like it? What if I put this yellow box over there and I say, press here to agree? This is a dark pattern. I don't need that. But what can I do to really make him understand, okay, you've given your data, click here to understand what data is being used for what purposes, correct? So I think this overall framework has to evolve, that matter, and therefore is also a question, typically in the AI metaverse and all of that, we have to really think about these ethical concerns and ethics from a user perspective, ethics from the children perspective. It's a huge debate today. Today, designs are getting age-appropriate designs. UK has done it, US has done it. And we need to also get rid of the idea that privacy means, oh, you have got something to hide. No, you don't have anything to hide. We as human beings we are hardwired to hide something because that's what makes us humans. So that's what I think.
Very interesting. Yeah. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think the framework needs to be designed in that way, like whatever policy we are establishing the organization. So whatever is written, that should be implemented, and also that should be audited in a periodic basis, so that any company, any organization can build that kind of trust also with the customer, with the individual, that yes, we are following this and we are implementing this. So with respect to the artificial intelligence or other emerging technologies are coming, so they have to evolve the acceptance of the technologies and leverage the existing policy and process, where they can define what is required in terms of security, as we have talked about the encryption part, and how the security, how we are implementing the security of our infrastructure. So there are frameworks like we can follow if for example, in India, there is no law has been enacted, right? But organization is following ISO standards, PCI DSS, NIST frameworks they are following. But they are actually combining all of these with the privacy requirements also. Because they know somehow in future privacy will come and it will come in our head, like we have to implement it. But yes, we have to prepare ourselves by the combination of these, following these frameworks.
Very good. I think that we are on top of the hour. We're exactly noon. Any other comments before I think so? We have covered the three topics, what we took it.
Yes.
Understanding security and privacy, understanding its challenges, and some of the solutions, possible solutions. Maybe this is one of the first series of the webinar. We have set the ground for it. Maybe in the next section, we can go into details of certain parts of it and it more. And thank you very much again, everybody, for your extreme
Thank
views.
you.
We have discussed about technology aspects of it. We discussed about legal aspects of it. And I'm hoping that our viewers would like and give us a comment for our next webinar. Thank you very much. So shall we close this session? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.